Welcome into the Touchdown Alabama Magazine show. TJ Paysinger along my side. I'm Jonathan McMath. And TJ, Alabama coming off a thrashing in Florida. Absolute beatdown, 31-6 at Bryant-Denny Stadium. The Florida Gators only posting 19 points in the last two meetings between these two teams. Your thoughts on the game?
Well, I said on last week's show that I did not think this game would be anything like the 2005 game. And I don't think I've ever been more happy to be wrong. It was very close and very similar looking to the 2005 game. Alabama comes out, starts fast, has a big first half, scores 24 points, scores on their first 4 possessions, and runs away with it, completely manhandled the Florida Gators. A lot of the pundits and ESPN around the nation are saying that Alabama has separated itself from the rest of the country, and it's very hard to disagree with that at this point.
I tell you what, the University of Alabama actually 8 less yards, on offense, and on defense they have the 4 picks. So if you sort of look at the stat sheet, you can see the reason why Alabama won the game is because they took care of the football.
They sure did. Florida turns the ball over 4 times. If you turn the ball over 4 times, especially deep in your own territory, odds are you're going to lose the game. They had 281 total yards, only 79 rushing. Wow. What does that say about that Bama defense? With Jeffrey Demps, he was pretty much a non-factor. Only had 47 yards on 11 touches. John Brantley went 16 of 31, 202 yards, 2 costly interceptions, a pick 6. How about it? True freshman C.J. Mosley capped off the scoring for the night. Great to see. Nico Johnson picked off Mr. Everything, Mr. All-World, newfound weapon for Florida, Trey Burton's jump pass, a Tebow-esque jump pass in the end zone on their first drive of the game. It was pretty much over with after that point, Alabama the rest of the game.
Yeah, I think one of the major differences in this game is the coaching. Alabama's coaching staff was ready for the game. You mentioned the jump pass. Kirby Smart was over there acting like they were going to throw the jump pass. Nico Johnson slides over and he makes the pick. You talked about C.J. Mosley, the true freshman. He had a great game, but what about Courtney Upshaw? He had an absolute fantastic game.
I read somewhere that Courtney Upshaw's performance might have been the most dominant performance by a defensive player at Alabama since last year's BCS championship game with Marcel Darius. So I think Upshaw, he's improving his draft status, that's for sure, whether he leaves the end of this year or next year. But he had a great game, chasing John Brantley down from behind on one particular play, batting balls down, providing all kinds of pressure. A great weapon for the defense, and hopefully he'll continue to keep that up heading into the rest of these games.
Well, I think the University of Alabama, all in all, looked pretty good. Trent Richardson, Mark Ingram only combined for 110 yards. Greg McElroy didn't even throw for 100. But when you get the ball in such great territory like Alabama did, and you get the pick 6, you don't necessarily have to have everything go right for you. I think if you're Nick Saban, the one thing you try to improve upon is the second half. The offense sort of let down a little bit. They only had, I think, maybe 5 touches the whole third quarter.
That was it. It was one of those things where the offense couldn't really seem to rebound in the second half from Florida's adjustments that they made. But they didn't really need to. Had it been a closer game without all the interceptions in the first half, we might be looking at a possibly closer score, maybe even a different outcome. But Florida dug themselves in too deep of a hole. They couldn't get out of it. And Alabama rolled in this game. In the second half, or in the first half, something we got to bring up. We got to bring up Marquise Mays. We have to bring up Marquise Mays and his great Wildcat formation. Threw the pass to wide open Michael Williams in that end zone. That was great to see. Felt good for the kid.
Yeah, Marquise Mays, a former high school quarterback, he just lobbed it out there perfectly, and Williams caught it on the fly. Alabama played an absolutely fantastic game against Florida. Pretty much wraps it up talking about Florida, but Alabama takes on another Eastern Conference foe. They go to Columbia, South Carolina. College game day is going to be there. Columbia is going to be rocking. South Carolina ranked 19th in the nation. It's going to be a 3:30 p.m. Eastern start. Talk a little bit about the game. Your thoughts on the matchup.
Well, as we all know, this is the first of the rest of Alabama's opponents that are coming off a bye week. All the rest of them off bye weeks. We'll be talking about that the rest of the season. But as Nick Saban pointed out in his news conference on Monday, that doesn't always seem to matter. Opponents in the last 5 years, teams in the last 5 years in the SEC coming off of bye weeks are 29-29. So he's not buying into that. I don't know, should we buy into it? I don't think we should. But it's South Carolina. It's going to be a great atmosphere. We'll see if they can handle the big game against Alabama this week.
Steve Spurrier's 6-5 against the University of Alabama, but at South Carolina, he's 0-2, trying to get that first win, and boy, would it be a huge win for South Carolina. They've already defeated the #1 ranked basketball team in Kentucky in this calendar year. They've already defeated Arizona State, the #1 ranked College World Series team in baseball, and now they're trying to go for the trifecta. Can it be done? Well, we'll answer that a little bit later in our prediction segment, excuse me. But if you don't mind, talk a little bit about Stephen Garcia, and how do you think Steve Spurrier pulling him in the fourth quarter against Auburn maybe affected his psyche? Will he be ready to go?
I think it helped him, in all honesty. I think that he's going to come out with something to prove. I think he's probably deep down inside, whether he voiced it or not, I think he's probably a little bit PO'd at the fact that he got pulled in that game for a true freshman, Connor Shaw, who threw 2 interceptions. Stephen Garcia had a great game against Auburn up until his 2 costly fumbles. Before those 2 fumbles, he went 15 of 21, 235 yards, and 3 touchdowns, including 2 touchdowns to his all-world wide receiver, Alshon Jeffrey, who finished the night with 192 receiving yards. Anytime you got a guy like that, I guess it improves your stats. But I think, going back to Stephen Garcia, I think that he's going to come out in this Alabama game looking to show the Gamecock Nation that he is a capable quarterback and that he can lead his team to a victory over a number 1 ranked team.
Well, Stephen Garcia, like you said, he played a great game at the beginning and really up until the fourth quarter. He got South Carolina in position to win the game. He just couldn't finish it off. Do you think there's any chance that we see Connor Shaw?
Honestly, I don't think so. It really all depends. I think if the game is close all the way up until the end, I think that maybe Stephen Garcia stays in the game. But I think that if Alabama comes out and gets 2 quick touchdowns, maybe if Stephen Garcia kind of throws a lot of picks, maybe fumbles the ball again, I can see Steve Spurrier repeating what happened in the Auburn game and sending Connor Shaw in there just to teach Stephen Garcia another lesson. But if it's a close game going into the fourth quarter, you got to go with your experienced quarterback and keep him in.
One thing that can help Stephen Garcia out is that true freshman running back, Marcus Lattimore. He caught fire early on, but against Auburn, he didn't even have 40 rushing yards. Marcus Lattimore's really got to help him out.
He sure does. He's a great player, great young back. A lot of people comparing him early on to Herschel Walker.
Bo Jackson?
You know, those are some tall orders there, but he is a great player. He only had 33 yards against Auburn, and as far as I know, I'm pretty sure Alabama's rush defense is better than Auburn, so he better step up his game and take off any of that pressure for his quarterback.
Yeah, if he can take off just a little bit of pressure and allow Stephen Garcia to go downfield, find Torrey Gurley, Alshon Jeffrey, some of those huge wide receivers that South Carolina has, I think they have a chance to win the game. On the flip side of things, South Carolina, they've got a pretty good defense themselves. Stephon Gilmore is an absolute incredible talent back there at cornerback, and so is Chris Culver.
He sure is. This kind of goes with my key matchup, actually. My key matchup this week is Greg McElroy for Alabama against that great secondary of South Carolina. They got Stephon Gilmore, Chris Culver, a lot of talented guys. Could possibly be more talented than Florida's secondary. That's kind of anybody's guess. But I think that if Greg McElroy can establish some drives, throw the ball, Julio Jones, Marquise Mays, and some of these guys, I think that Alabama will be in the best shape to win the game moving the ball on these defensive backs. However, if they get a couple of picks off of Greg McElroy, we could be looking at a very tight game.
And that's something that we Alabama fans definitely don't want to see. I'll get to my key matchup in just a moment, but talk a little bit about Julio Jones. Last year he had his knee hurt a little bit, and he wasn't quite as effective. He set out most of Monday's practice with a bruised knee. If he's not 100%, how much does that affect this Alabama wide receiving corps?
I think it affects it a pretty good bit because everybody seems to look at Julio Jones as the number 1 receiver for Alabama, and he certainly is, and that's why he gets a lot of double teams. But you got to kind of look at the other guys, the supporting cast. Darius Hanks had a great game last week. Marquise Mays, of course, did. We already said that. You got Mike Williams, the tight end. You got some of these other guys that can step in for Julio Jones, but you can't replace a guy like him. He's just a physical freak. He's a monster. He whenever he gets the ball, he's kind of like a running back. You know, he won't go down on the first hit. So I think it would take a little bit away from the game if he comes into that not 100%. But that's where we have to count on the younger receivers to step up. So we'll see.
Well, getting back to my key matchup, I'm going to take the Alabama defensive line against that offensive line of South Carolina. I think it's a huge matchup in the trenches because if the Alabama defense can shut down that offensive line and not allow Marcus Lattimore to get his legs turning, then I think they can really do a lot of different things on defense. Maybe get to the heads a little bit of Connor Shaw or Stephen Garcia, whoever the quarterback is, and make them think that they have to win the game with their arms. And if they do that, it's really going to bode a lot of trouble for Stephen Garcia and really that whole offense of South Carolina.
Yeah, if Lattimore can turn up them yards and take pressure off those quarterbacks, though, it's going to be quite a game for Alabama. I'm hoping that it doesn't come down to that.
Of course, this offense of South Carolina is nothing like those old Florida offenses that we saw when Steve Spurrier was the head coach. This one's sort of more like Alabama's. You've got to run to set up the pass.
Yeah, certainly. I'm thinking Steven Spurrier is going to definitely try to run the ball early on, try to run the ball, get that running game established for his quarterbacks. But he doesn't have a guy like Danny Warfel or anybody like that under center, so we'll see what he does. I don't know.
Well, now let's segue into the prediction segment, part of the show today. TJ, you were 7-0 last week. I was 4-3, just fell off just a little bit. I hear you got some news about maybe a new part of the show.
Yeah. We got right down here. If you look, we'll have all of our records from the previous weeks all combined to show our kind of season as far as the
whether good or bad.
Yeah, whether good or bad. In his case, you'll see right down here. Last week's pretty bad for him. Hopefully, I won't be bad next week. We'll see.
Well, let's talk about our first game. We've got Arkansas taking on Texas A&M in Arlington.
Arkansas got a bye week after their heartbreaking loss to the Crimson Tide. I think they go into Texas A&M, or actually it's in Arlington, so I think they defeat Texas A&M pretty easily. A&M's defense has always been kind of porous the past couple of years. I think Arkansas gets it done.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Bobby Petrino's offense is just a little bit too much for that Texas A&M defense. Jared Johnson, the quarterback at Texas A&M, could make things a little bit interesting, but I think Arkansas, in the end, gets it done. Now the next big game, undefeated Michigan State going to the Big House to face undefeated Michigan.
I was kind of surprised ESPN College Game Day didn't go to this one. I figured they would. You know, it's in the Big House. Yep. It's ancient rivals, Michigan State and Michigan. Mark D'Antonio he just got released from the hospital, and he is not missing this Michigan game. He's not. He's going to be up there in the press box. And because of that, I think it's a little extra motivation for the Spartans, and I think they come away with a victory in the Big House.
I'll tell you what, that's an upset pick, and I think I'm going to have to agree with that upset pick. Yes. I think they get it done in the Big House. I think Michigan State's defense will be better than Michigan's defense. That's ultimately the difference maker. Now Absolutely. We've got Florida State going on the road to Miami.
Miami finally comes home after a month of being on the road, and I think they get it done. There's been some epic matchups in this series over the years, particularly when Bobby Bowden was the coach at Florida State. But I think Miami takes this one at home.
I'm going to go with Florida State. I think Jimbo Fisher's going to have that offense at Florida State's ready to go. Christian Ponder is going to be the difference maker. Mississippi State goes on the road to play Houston. They're without their top two quarterbacks.
Mississippi State kind of being a little surprise team this year. I think they go into Houston and beat them. You know, Case Keenum tore his ACL. It's a heartbreaking. You know, he's out for the year. Mississippi State and Dan Mullen go on the road and get a big road victory. We've
got just a few more minutes left. I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to pick Mississippi State. And let's hurry it up a little bit. Tennessee plays at Georgia.
Man, we could talk about Tennessee and LSU game from this past weekend for 30 whole minutes, but I'm going to go with Tennessee. I think they go into Athens and beat them.
Well, I write Georgia off my list. I'm going to go with Tennessee as well. I'm falling off the bandwagon. I don't guess I was really ever on it, but I think Tennessee gets it done. Auburn at Kentucky.
Auburn is too talented for Kentucky to hang with them. As much as I would like Kentucky to make this one a game, I just don't think it's going to happen. Auburn's going to blow them out. Yeah,
Cam Newton's going to have a field day. If that Florida's offense can put up 48 points, then you're well aware that Auburn offense can do it.
Absolutely.
Auburn gets it done. Now, LSU goes on the road to play at Florida.
LSU coming off probably the luckiest win I've ever seen in all my years of watching college football. I think they run into a wall at the hands of Florida in the swamp, and Florida gets it done.
I think Florida gets it done as well. LSU's got a good defense, but I think at home in the swamp, going to give the edge to the Gators, and that brings us to Alabama at South Carolina.
Steve Spurrier is going to be throwing that buzzer a lot in this game, buddy. I think it's going to be close for a little while. I think in the second half, it's not going to be quite as bad as the Arkansas game in the second half for Alabama, but I think that Alabama gets it done and wins 41-20 on the road.
Well, I've got a similar score. Alabama gets it done 31-20. I don't know if they'll put up over 40 points, but I think the Alabama team has went through a lot of adversity this year, and they'll get things done on the road as they come back home to play Ole Miss homecoming. Well, thanks for joining us. For TJ Paysinger, I'm Jonathan McMath. Tune in next week for the Touchdown Alabama Magazine show.